Okay.
You might want to
Well,
ask, you might want to ask people who are moving around and answering phones or doing things to just turn off their video.
okay. So, welcome everybody to this webinar on final green wishes, and we're really pleased to have you today. So, what the game plan is that we will have some short introductions to Colorado Jewish Climate Action and to RECA, the two organizations that are sponsoring this event, and then we'll have a little bit of a introduction to the program, and then we'll hear from our speakers, and at the end we'll have some time for question and answers. So with that, I'd like to take a minute to share a little bit about Colorado Jewish Climate Action, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. My name is Moshe Kornfeld, and I'm the Executive Director of Colorado Jewish Climate Action. And the name is somewhat self-explanatory, but Colorado Jewish Climate Action is a multi-generational, diverse group of people from across the state working to educate, inspire, and activate Colorado Jews and Jewish organizations to embrace climate solutions. CJCA works with the entire Jewish community, with interfaith and frontline allies, and with local and national partner organizations to achieve a just and sustainable world for future generations. So that's, and I forgot to mention before, if you are, make sure to mute yourself if you are not on mute. And just a few other things that our focus areas, we have three main focus areas. One is education and youth empowerment. So we have our second focus area is state level advocacy work. And our final is greening institutions. So we work with Jewish organizations for the most part on energy efficiency and renewable energy projects. One other event that I just want to make sure to mention, save the date for on February 2nd at the Hebrew Educational Alliance here in Denver. We are going to have the Colorado Jewish Climate Summit. It's going to be a day-long event of learning and action, and it's going to bring people together from across the state to really sort of talk and to demonstrate that Colorado Jews care deeply about climate action. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Debbie Kornfeld, who's going to talk about RECA.
Good evening. I'm talking from Rochester, New York, and RECA is the Rochester Area Interfaith Climate Action. Founded in about 2018, we found that there was a nice niche for people of faith to get together to talk about how to help their synagogues and their congregations be more sustainable. Our mission is we're a group of individuals and organizations of faith in Rochester. And Rochester has probably more than 900 or 1,000 churches and synagogues and mosques. And we have tried through both advocacy, education, support to help congregations be more sustainable. One of the things that we have going right now is like a clergy support team to help them figure out how to bring climate information and into their sermons. And also we have a green team support, sort of help figure out how green teams can be more supportive of their synagogues or churches or mosques. And we share a last name, Moshe Kornfeld and I, because we are in fact related.
Wonderful. Thanks, Debbie. So I'm going to stop this share for a moment now. And so now I'm going to do a little bit more of a formal introduction to tonight's program. So thank you so much for joining this evening for Final Green Wishes, Climate-Friendly Burial Theology and Practice. To start, I'd like to say how wonderful it is to collaborate on this program with Debbie Kornfeld, who claims to have inside information about my birth. Just the other day, my son Noah informed his Savta, the aforementioned Debbie Kornfeld, that she was old and going to die. Nothing is certain, Benjamin Franklin famously quipped, except death and taxes. And we are indeed living in uncertain times. The future habitability of planet Earth is under threat, and we seem to be moving in the wrong direction. And while the situation may seem bleak, I'm motivated by the understanding that the trajectory of the climate crisis will be determined by our actions. We have a responsibility to do everything in our power to achieve a just and livable future. To quote Rebecca Solnit's response to the recent election, the fact that we cannot save everything does not mean that we cannot save anything, and everything we can save is worth saving. And I have shared something similar to what I'm going to share, the rest of what I'm going to share. So if you've heard this before, I apologize. Before founding Colorado Jewish Climate Action, I spent a decade in the academy as an anthropologist, teaching courses on religion, environmentalism, and politics, and researching and writing about American Jewish life. I'd like to share one of my favorite theories with you, which comes from Roy Rappaport, a 20th century luminary in the fields of ritual and ecological anthropology. Rappaport argues that language and religion co-evolved. When humans developed the capacity to speak, they also developed the capacity to lie. Religion and the belief in the supernatural kept people honest, fostering cooperative rather than self-interested behavior. And so while there are many examples of maladaptive expressions of religion, religion is ultimately a key adaptation that encourages pro-social cooperative behavior. Communities of faith encourage us to seek a higher purpose, not only for our own generation, but also with reverence for our ancestors and a commitment to our descendants. The concept of Ledor Vador, from generation to generation, serves as a framework for seeing ourselves as profoundly responsible to our ancestors and to our descendants. And yet, while religion enables cooperation, its Western expression has also contributed to our environmental problems. In The Historical Roots of Our Ecological Crisis, a seminal essay written in 1967, historian of science Lynn White asserts that Judeo-Christianity is the most anthropocentric religion the world has ever known. In Western Judeo-Christianity, White argues, the natural world is held up as an object to be used and abused. It is this deep cultural view that has enabled us to soil our nest and to act in profoundly destructive ways. White encourages us to reclaim those voices within our traditions that re-sacralize the natural world, pointing in particular to St. Francis as a key Christian historical figure who imagined the natural world not merely as an object, but as an animated religious subject alongside and interconnected with humankind. It may come as no surprise that climate hero Pope Francis chose this saint for his papal name. Those of us working in the Jewish tradition need to reclaim figures such as Rabbi Abraham Isaac Kook and Rabbi Nachman, along with our ancient agricultural system of Shemitah, the sabbatical year, Yovel, the Jubilee, and the agricultural rules that place justice at the center of our approach to living sustainably on the land. We need to reclaim these voices as we work to undermine the still prevailing view that the natural world is merely an object. Dominion of humans over nature is at the heart of capitalist exploitation of the natural world, and it is our job to assert stewardship as our guiding moral and economic principle. I understand the slogan, "Drill, baby, drill," to be an expression of this problematic theological worldview. And perhaps we should take these ideas even further as we work to flatten the egocentric hierarchy that is at the root of our ecological crisis. Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shlomi points to the Yizkor and memorial services when we pray that God will add the souls of our departed loved ones to the Tzaror HaChaim, the chain of life. Schachter Shlomi asserts that this is a hint that guides us to rethink and replace the hierarchical great chain of being as our core model for understanding our world with a great chain of life that enfolds everything from the microorganisms that keep our planet alive to the planetary intelligence of which they are a part. This idea that we must humbly view ourselves as deeply interconnected with all life is a fitting jumping off point for today's conversation about climate-friendly burial practices. We are honored to have three leaders in this field to share their perspectives with us today. I will share their bios in the order in which they will present. After their presentations, we will have time for questions and conversation. Please feel free to add questions in the chat that the speakers can address during the Q&A. So we're going to start with Dr. Abu Islam. Dr. Abu Islam is a trustee of Muslim Community Association of Rochester, whose sole purpose is to manage the only Muslim burial site in Rochester and help the community in burying their dead following Islamic principles. He also served as the president of the Council of Trustees at the Islamic Center of Rochester. He took part in interfaith organizations like Commission for Jewish-Muslim Understanding, Muslim Catholic Alliance for decades. By profession, he is a research associate professor of the Golisano Institute for Sustainability at the Rochester Institute of Technology. Next, we'll hear from Jamie Sarche. Jamie is the director of pre-planning at Colorado's oldest family-owned funeral home. Her calling is helping people be less afraid of death. She helps them talk through all options, and in Colorado there are many, to understand what truly meets their values. They provide a planned and funded funeral or memorial service to create a path for bereavement long before it's needed. By facing their mortality, her clients can live better, more meaningful lives. And finally, we'll hear from Emily B. Miller. Emily is a licensed funeral director, embalmer, and founder of Colorado's first environmental burial preserve. Emily was working as a funeral home manager when she perceived the need in her community for a different type of cemetery with a native habitat mission. She also volunteers on the board of directors of the Green Burial Council in the role of assisting funeral homes through the certification process, hearing perspectives from participating funeral providers and cemeteries across the United States and Canada. And with that, I offer the floor, the Zoom room floor, to Dr. Abu Islam.
Thank you very much, Moshe, and thank you for organizing this program. And I'm going to share my slides. Those of you who are in audio, don't worry about it. It's not essential that you need to see the slides. So what is green burial in Islam? So in general, what is green burial, right? The term means that we want to come up with a burial process that is environmentally friendly for our planet, right? And we want to allow the earth, Mother Earth, what the nature intended it to do. It is very good at composting and recycling. So we want to help it to do it, simple as that. And we want to leave this planet in a very cost-effective way, bluntly speaking. And we want to leave this earth as toxic-free as possible for our next generation. So if we can do all this, we'd say that is a green burial. Now, in Islam, this green burial is based on some principles. There are very lot of verses in the Quran, our holy book, about this. I'm going to pick only 3 of them that kind of simply explains what those principles are. The first one is, O children of Adam, eat and drink, but waste not by excess, for Allah, the God, loves not the wasters. He's telling us, enjoy this earth, but do not waste. Then he says, every soul shall test death, and to us he shall be returned. Probably Benjamin Franklin was correct, actually, in his statement. And then the last one I'll pick up is that from the earth we created you, and into it we will return you, and from it we will extract you another time. He's saying that, hey, we created you from earth, we'll return you there, and again we'll raise you. Essentially, that says I'm an engineer, so in that term, we are all biodegradable, right? That's all it's saying. So these are the essential verses which outlines how we should bury our dead. So let's look at what are some of the principles. So I wrote down some points. You don't have to read all of them. I'm going to explain each one of them. The first and foremost, if I could pick only one point that kind of summarizes everything, that is swift burial. In Islam, it is highly recommended to bury as soon as possible. It's not measured in months, weeks, days. It's measured in hours. And there is both theological and environmental aspect of this criterion. What is the theological? In Islamic belief is that after our soul leaves our body, when we die, it actually ascends to heaven, right? There are various descriptions how good souls and bad souls are treated by the angels as the soul ascends to heaven. And then based on it's a good soul or bad soul, they're handed over their decisions, their criterions that, hey, you're a good soul, you'll enjoy the next life, or you're a bad soul, you'll be punished in the next life. They're given this, and then they come down. And after they come down, they literally see the body actually. The time that we're spending with the body, whether we are holding it in a morgue or whether we are washing it or whether we are dressing it, they're actually seeing it. And they're actually asking, hurry, 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 right? They want to get back to the body. And our next phase, when we get to the under the grave, there's a questioning period. The soul and the body gets together and we are questioned by the angels, right? So the body, when it comes back from heaven, it's actually asking, quick, 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 bury me. And there's also another teaching that says that our dead has a right upon us. And what is that right? Is to bury that dead as soon as possible, right? So that's why we need to be bury a body very quickly. Now that's the theological aspect. Now, what are the environmental aspect? Number one, it prevents spread of disease. Number one, we don't know what shape the body was, what kind of disease the body has, and over time the body will rot. So it is preventing any spread of disease. And then we are spending so much energy and resource to preserve it, right? We are putting in a vault, we are cooling it and whatnot. So all that is gone. And third emotional aspect I will bring out, although it's not environmental, we believe that if you bury the body as soon as possible, it helps healing of the nearest and dearest sooner than just lingering. They're just hopeless. What do you do? The body is in the morgue. I'm doing it sitting at home. Sooner you bury it, sooner the healing process begins. So that's very important. The next step is we have to wash the body. Washing the body is very simple. We wash the body in the same way we wash ourselves before any prayer, right? Or we take a shower with just warm water, scented water. It's very similar to the way we clean ourselves. Here also there is exception. If the body is, say, wounded or diseased or burned, or say a soldier hurt in a battleground, doesn't have to be washed. You can bury that body the same way. What is the principle? You don't need to take, as the body is hurting, oozing, you don't have to spread that. Just bury it as it is. That is fine, right? And the third aspect is that after washing, we shroud it. The shrouding is very interesting in Islam. This is not about we put on suits and jackets and all that. This is a simple piece of cloth that we put on. I'm going to show you a picture. This is the same cloth when we do our pilgrimage, our Hajj. This is the dress we wear. There's 2 pieces of cloth for men and 3 or 4 pieces of cloth for women. We just shroud ourselves with that. And that is the same cloth, similar cloth, we shroud our dead when we bury. And interesting thing is, similar to when we go for Hajj, the rich, the poor, the king, the beggar, they all look the same. So when we shroud our body, everybody looks the same. And of course, that white cloth is made of cotton, and that is very essentially biodegradable. The next point, extremely, extremely important. Embalmment is not allowed in Islam, not allowed at all. When the body died, you're not supposed to prick it with a piece of pen, let alone cut it open and take the organs out. Not allowed, period, right? So we cannot touch it. And then minimize transportation. It is recommended you bury the body in the same locality, the same town the person died. So transportation, again, all this goes together. Transportation delays the burial. You have to, again, find means to preserve the body. All those things are bad for environment. So you're supposed to bury in the same locality. The funeral prayer is very simple in Islam. Of all the prayers that we have, funeral prayer is the quickest. It doesn't take more than a couple of minutes to complete a funeral prayer. Why? Everything is pointing down to number one, the swift burial. It is so important to bury the body quickly. We don't even want to spend time praying. Let's bury the body, then we can pray as much as we want, but not where the body is in front of us. Funeral procession, the way we carry the bodies, very simple. We want to carry the body, 4 or 5 person carry the body slowly, walking and taking to the graveyard, avoiding any loud music, loud sound. We want to minimize environmental pollution, the noise pollution, right? We want to do that. Our graves, extremely simple, right? There is no structure around the grave. We don't want any structures. We don't want any fancy tombstones, right? So that space should be as simple as it can be. Now, of course, in USA, there's local law where some places you have to use the vault, some places you have to use the coffin. So yes, we do have to follow the local law, but In Islam does not require any of that. You're just supposed to put the body in the soil so it get blended as soon as possible. Over here, if you have to put the body in a vault, we do put some soil inside it so body gets decomposed quickly. And the last one is also very important, is reuse the gravesite. Conservation of land. If we keep on taking space for graveyard, and our earth will be filled with reserved graveyard. It is okay to rebury, right? Burial sites have their law. After how many years body decomposes, they know that, and it is okay to reuse that grave site to bury the person, another person in that site. So, what should be some of the green wishes, right? So first and foremost, I talked about the burial rites, but the first point I wrote here is also important. In this country, this life support system is very interesting. I think everybody should make a decision when we get to that point in our life, how to instruct the life support system. I mean, it's a wonderful creation of modern technology, but it can extend life at a point where life is meaningless. And it come to a point where it's very hard for the relatives to make that decision, whether to take that support system on or off. So you should make that decision and give the instructions to your near and dear ones. And keep in mind, it's nothing, you are actually, when you're at that point where you're just sitting in life support system for months and weeks or months, you're actually taking away the opportunity of maybe another healthy person who could have been treated in that bed. So make wise decision about that. Again, instruct your relatives to get yourself buried as soon as possible. Again, there are a lot of emotions involved here. Somebody will say, hey, I'm coming from West Coast, wait, or I cannot bury without, I have to take the body in. No, body wants to go to the grave. Get it done, right? People who doesn't see that body, it's okay. Remember that person alive. Instruct not to be transported to different places. Instruct not to wait for anyone. Instruct to bury coffin free. And instruct to donate the expense of the elaborate post-burial programs, right? Any big programs you're trying to do for the dead body after the person is dead, donate that person for a good cause rather than throwing a big occasion. Again, that's what I wanted to say. I wanted to leave you with two pictures. The left one is called Jannatul Baqi. This is the most sacred of burial places next to the Prophet mosques. You can see at the background. This piece of land, some of the most important person in Islam are buried there. And this there's no permanent structure in this graveyard. This temporary stones are put there when a grave is dug. But after a few years, the caretakers know what body decomposes. They bulldoze this and start burying again. But this is the most sacred burial places in Islam, and you can see that's how they do it. Very simple, no structure, they reuse the space. And on the right, I just showed you a picture of Muslim cemetery in Rochester. We don't have big structures. That simple placard on the ground that shows the name of the person buried there. So with that, I'll stop. Looking forward to hearing from you. And if you have any questions, we can discuss that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Islam. I'll turn the floor now over to Jamie Sarche.
Thank you. Wow. Abu, I'm so happy to be in this space with you, and I appreciate Moshe and Debbie creating this. And Emily, I'm so happy to hear from you soon as well. It's so interesting to think about how similar Muslim customs are and Jewish customs are. And so much of the goal of Jewish customs are very, very similar to what we just learned from Dr. Islam. So it's very fascinating to think about it. And it's so important that we recognize how much we have in common. It's really a beautiful and touching thing to me to think about that. So Jewish burial tradition is very similar in that we want to do things very quickly. We want to treat the body with kindness and dignity and compassion. We do similar things in terms of washing. So I'm going to really just talk through exactly how we would do things in a Jewish setting. What I do want to acknowledge, though, is that what I talk about in terms of what is tradition for Jews doesn't mean that all Jews do that. So lots of Jews would make different decisions that we wouldn't consider traditionally Jewish. So I just want to kind of set the table that way. So in Jewish tradition, again, we want to treat the body as the vessel of the soul. It's a gift from God, and we want to give it back to God and in the way it was given to us. So we are going to bring it into our care and wash it in a ritual fashion. We have a group called the Hevra Kadisha, the Holy Society. 3 men take care of men, 3 women take care of women. In the Denver community, the Hevra Kadisha is made up of very observant Jewish people. That's not necessarily true in other communities, but that's definitely true here. The Hevra Kadisha will wash the body in a ritual way. Again, it's a purification process. And they're saying prayers. They don't know exactly what kind of things the body has done in its life, but they are saying prayers and confessing and asking God for forgiveness for whatever might have happened, washing the body in a very ritualistic fashion, taking off any nail polish, any makeup, making sure everything is clean and beautiful and perfect. The body is then dressed in a shroud. So very similarly to Muslim tradition, that shroud is a 7-piece garment. The last piece is a kittel, which is a robe that the high priests wore for high holidays, and people wear them to high holidays. So very similar in like what Dr. Islam said, what's used during the Hajj. And the thought process is very similar in that everybody, no matter what they have in life, is equal in death. And so we should all be buried in a very simple way. In Israel, most people are not buried in a casket, but in the United States and other places, most people are buried in a casket, but we do a very simple casket. And it needs to be completely biodegradable to be kosher. It's all wood. There's no nails. If there is any kind of stain on the wood, it is a biodegradable stain. If there's an interior, a lining, a pillow, that's all biodegradable, because everything should go back to the earth. And for very similar reasons, we come from the earth and we should go back to the earth. And from a bereavement perspective, we consider the obligation to bury someone to be the highest mitzvah, the highest obligation, the most important obligation, because that person can never repay us for that kindness. And from a way for the bereaved to handle things, the people who are grieving, it's incredibly powerful to take our person from where they are to where they need to be, to tuck them into the ground, to shovel dirt into the grave. It is incredibly empowering and also cathartic to have that kind of moment to take care of our loved one. And from a grief perspective, having a physical action, having that ritual gets us in touch with the emotions that can get locked inside of us if we don't have some ritual. We live in a society now that really doesn't focus very much on ritual. We really sort of think about things where I would say toxically positive, like we don't want to even consider death. And we want to kind of shut the door on it and not pay attention to it because it makes us feel bad. And so we sort of have gotten focused on it's just about getting rid of a dead body. And as Dr. Islam said, it's important. We have to do something with a dead body. It would cause problems if we leave it laying around. But there's just so much more that's so important to take care of the people who are grieving and to take care of the earth. So tucking our person into the ground is the most natural way. And that is the life cycle. Everything that grows comes from something that was dead, and the earth needs bodies to feed it. And we're not really recognizing that these days. Lots of Jewish people that I run into are considering cremation because they believe that it is an environmentally beneficial thing to do. They say things like, I don't want to use up space. And they're concerned that if they get buried, that is detrimental to the earth. And I would encourage them, and do encourage them, to recognize that the earth needs it. And secondly, when we have cemeteries, we can't put buildings there. And that's beneficial. It is good to have green space. In Hebrew, the word for cemetery is Beit Chaim, meaning the house of the living. And so we are supposed to go to those places and utilize them as parks and be part of that environment. And we do have headstones in Jewish tradition. It is very important to mark the life of someone who has lived and to continue to memorialize them. And in Jewish tradition, when we go visit, we leave a stone on the headstone to actually kind of recognize that we still remember that person and that they are still a valuable member of our community. And there's other, theories as to why we do that. But it really is meaningful to go to a place and be able to kind of commune with the person who is no longer physically with us. But I am just kind of blown away by the similarities. And I just do think it's so important that we all recognize when we're in this kind of a community that we really do have so much more in common than what separates us. And I hope that we can use those things to connect in a deeper way. So thanks, and I'll look forward to what kind of questions come up.
Thank you
Great.
so. Oh, I'll turn it over to Emily. Go ahead.
No, we were echoing the same thing. Thank you both for your contributions. Before I start, I do just want to apologize, everyone, that I have my camera off. It's the way I was able to make it work tonight, and I'm very happy to be here. So my name is Emily Miller, and my background is a long time ago, I did my undergraduate studies. I majored in religions of the world. So I got a little taste of theology from all sides and all faiths, which ended up serving me very well when I later entered funeral service. And I've had the privilege of working at a variety of cemeteries and funeral homes in a diverse population settings. So I really have had a little taste of everything. But I first found out about natural burial when I was in mortuary college studying funeral directing options, learning what all of the options are for final dispositions. And we were assigned to read Grave Matters by Mark Harris. And I had an immediate emotional reaction to the idea of a final resting place in nature. I think the thought of kind of returning to the earth it persists in a lot of cultures. It's a concept that we would encounter. But the idea of returning to an earth in a place that is wild and governed by nature and for the biodiversity of critters that can live there, that's what struck me as so different than the cemeteries that I was used to. So I entered this conventional funeral and cemetery career. As I said, I had the privilege of working with a lot of diverse population groups, but I always had this soft spot in my heart. Oh, can't wait to meet a Jewish family, can't wait to meet an Islamic family because they're doing my type of burial, the simple things. And in fact, I worked at cemeteries that had different ones, but no, same ones too. Anyway, cemeteries with dedicated sections for the faith communities. And always noticed, wow, these funerals are so meaningful because of the influence of ritual, because this community has principles and theology and teachings of how what to say when there's nothing to be said, and what to do when it's too hard to think of what to do next. So I was a conventional funeral director and embalmer, but with a soft spot for natural burials and faith-based funeral services. So I was surprised later in my career to find that Colorado did not have a cemetery that was really dedicated for green burial. There are places that will allow natural burials, but none that went so far as to say, no, 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 this space is by and for nature. It is not a man-made space. And I left my funeral career as an entrepreneur to open this first ecological burial ground in the state of Colorado. We're the only cemetery that has a native habitat restoration mission. So it is an all faith cemetery. We take all comers, including folks from near and far. I do find that certainly we've had customers with Jewish and Muslim backgrounds, but we also do a lot with folks who have no particular religion, or they've fallen farther away from a Jewish or Muslim background. But anyhow, we sometimes have folks that are choosing this type of way natural burial because of the carbon footprint, because they want to be green. They also choose it because it gives a nicer funeral. Even a secular family can have the advantages of ritual and gathering when we have natural burial. And I also think that regardless of your faith, the idea of returning to the earth that gave us life, and that the nutrients in our body can be used again. And when you're in a natural burial setting, you sort of see the plants and animals who will benefit from that gift to return to the earth. I think that's a concept that is attracting people from all faiths towards a more natural burial. So we have I offer natural burial. I offer cremation burial when it's done with all biodegradable materials. We also both scatter and inter the products of body composting, of natural reduction, because all of those things are, as the others have said, it's a necessary return to the earth. It is the natural way of things. And also, we have I should have said, the mission of Colorado Burial Preserve. This is a degraded piece of ranch land. So this is something that has suffered from agriculture without regenerative practices, of course, which is unsustainable. So we have this piece of nature which has suffered at the hands of humans, and therefore by creating this gift back to the planet, to this earth, we can atone for some of that. And we do it specifically with our native prairie habitat restoration project, which I also call conservation management. So that's this idea that a green burial is good. Dr. Islam talked about, we don't need to have a vault. We don't want to have a casket. We want to have it like as minimal as it can be. I consider those kind of funeral questions, whereas once we get to the cemetery, we sort of start the clock on all the rest of time. And native grasses, native plant management, do an incredible job for all of us on this earth by sequestering carbon year after year. And when you take someone's grave space, which I should say, we dig the smallest hole we can to keep our disturbance minimal. We do it by hand when we can to keep our footprint minimal. We bury not only the person, but we include organic material, seasonal plants, straw, mulch, this kind of thing as we close the grave, to do our best to improve the soil conditions there. So then when we add these native plants, we are doing our best to combat drought, combat invasive species, and really create a native habitat that's going to be beneficial to the ecology that's appropriate for the area. And so these native plants have an incredible and immediate value of offering habitat for biodiversity. This is when we talk about pollinator resources, pollinator habitat. But it's not just the insects. Everyone across the food chain requires those base plants to get the whole food chain started. And as I mentioned, grasses in particular have a unique ability with carbon sequestration, because we all think about tree planting for carbon, and certainly pound for pound, a tree sequesters more carbon because of its giant mass. But whenever there's been a disturbance, such as a drought or a fire, which are both concerns here in Colorado, a tree forest takes it could be a generation before the carbon sequestration ability is back online and doing what we need it to do. But our native grasslands, and not just the grasses, but the forbs and herbs and others that survive out there, the grasses have this resiliency. They can come back within the same season after a fire, or at the most, they'll be doing their same job with carbon sequestration, next spring. So we need everything. We need our tree forests, and we need our grasslands and our wetlands and our coastal areas, and all of them need protecting. But certainly with cemetery management, we have an opportunity to look beyond this manicured space where it has to be green all year long and it has to be mowed. Whereas if we could rethink that to be, hey, it's supposed to be a little bit wild, because that's actually what's going to save us and future generations on this planet, then the question of, wow, I don't really want to be buried because I don't feel like that cemetery it doesn't feel right when I'm in it. And I don't want to take up a space. I'd rather leave that space for others. When we do it with conservation management, we are holding space, we're protecting space, and we want to fill up that cemetery, so then we could take on another piece of degraded, overranched, industrial agriculture, monoculture, ruined property, and enroll it into a native species restoration plan, and also give the community everything they need from a cemetery: the place to gather, the place to hold history and visit, and certainly to perform the requirements of their religious faith, etc. So I believe we can still have memorialization headstones to have a subtle little thing like the pictures Dr. Islam showed. These rough shaped rocks that are locally sourced, they barely ping the carbon footprint of a funeral if you calculate how many generations into the future we're going to be protecting this wild spaces on a funeral. So I've noticed that folks who come to these funerals are moved by the simplicity of it. I think the ones who are not religious are moved by having ritual and togetherness and a funeral at all back in their culture. So yeah, I really think that we can do a lot to spread the message around this by doing this more, by having these better funerals that are kinder to the earth, and also giving the survivors, the guests, the best experience we can. Because I know that the folks who understand this, including all our guests on here tonight, once you understand this and you see it, it becomes so obvious, just like that original aha moment I had about, wow, death and nature belong together. We have it in our ancient teachings of faith, and we also have to rediscover it in our society today, as you said, Moshe.
Thank you so much, Emily. So before we open it up for questions, Jamie is going to give a few more words about water cremation and natural organic reduction.
Yeah, thank you. So I want to just describe what those are, so you can really understand it. Most people don't really have a sense of what fire cremation is because we don't talk about it very often. So really quickly, I want to say fire cremation has a very high carbon footprint and is very detrimental to the environment, because to have the fire that is used to burn away all the tissue, we need to have a temperature at 1800 degrees. So it's about 30 gallons of gas that is used, and all of the emissions go up into the atmosphere. It's actually quite a contributor to climate change because so many people are doing it. And what we think of as ash is really ground bone. And that bone, because it's been burned, doesn't have nutrients anymore and is filled with gas. So we take it to these beautiful places because we want to be scattered there, and we're polluting those places. So fire cremation is very detrimental, but there are two other options if you don't want to do green burial, which Emily alluded to. So water cremation, the body is placed in a vessel. There's a number of different kinds of vessels. In the one that we use, it's about 12 gallons of water and an alkali that's similar to liquid soap. So it's denatured alcohol, potassium chloride, and vinegar that, together with the gut bacteria, rapidly decomposes the body, the tissue. And then what is left is the bone that's still in its natural state, and it goes through a processor. So we could think of that as ash. It's going to look like bread flour. You're going to get about a 5-pound bag of it that could be buried at a conservation cemetery. It can be scattered. It actually is a fertilizer. So it is what we kind of have thought fire cremains are. It is actually beneficial for the environment. And the solution that's produced is really like the ultimate miracle grow. And so it can be taken to places that need land restoration as well and help them to grow. Natural organic reduction that Emily mentioned is really body composting, and it's only available in a few states. Colorado is one of them. It's also available currently in Washington and might be available in California. It is legal in a number of other states, but I don't think it's necessarily being done yet, but it's going to build up more. The body is placed in a vessel with organic matter to facilitate the body turning into soil. It's got very good oxygenation and is turned every so often. And in a few months or 6 to 8 weeks, everything has turned to soil except for the bones that have to go through a processor, and then they're put back in and they are turned to soil. So it's a very quick decomposition process. It's different than traditional Muslim burial or traditional Jewish burial in that it is sped up. Traditional Jewish burial says don't slow anything down. That's one of the reasons we don't embalm, and don't speed anything up. But still, if you don't want to have burial, these are really, really good options. Or again, you could bury the cremated remains if you did water cremation, and you could bury the compost if you wanted to do that. In my mind, however, if you wanted to have a cemetery plot, I'm not sure it makes sense to bury the compost. Although, like I know at Colorado Burial Preserve, if you want a specific place that is yours, you could put your compost there as well. So there's really a lot to think about, especially in Colorado, if you forego a burial.
It was interesting. The time I've done burial of body compost, it was a blended Islamic and Christian family, and they chose body composting because it was her choice who died. But by the time it was all over, the Muslim spouse really wanted to keep it all together and have it be in a proper burial ground. So the other
So that's
thing
a good reason to do that.
yeah, it was right for these unique arrangements, sort of a blend of a meeting of the worlds, as we're all doing anyway. The one thing I would add about alkaline hydrolysis and the body composting is, yeah, alkaline hydrolysis is a greener version of cremation. It has a much lower footprint. The body composting, you sequester a lot of carbon with the actual compost process, and then assuming you ultimately put that to ground, you are completing the cycle. But I would argue that it is always greener to do nothing than to go to a facility and do something. Same with the embalming, same with any type of cremation, which I do consider the body composting. It still breaks you down. It's a disposition of reduction. Even if we sequester carbon in the body composting chamber, that gets started with a large amount of alfalfa material that comes to us through the industrial agricultural food chain. It takes a significant amount of drinkable water to grow that alfalfa. So I would argue that always kind of just simply leaving the body entire and returning it to the earth in this rapid way, it's going to always be a lower footprint than even the fanciest new invention to sequester carbon while we do extra stuff with extra things we had to buy. To me, it's sort of a little bit misguided when doing the minimum was always, as old as humanity, as old as our faiths, always good enough.
So, I know, thank you again. This has been so interesting and fascinating. I want to just sort of turn to two questions from the chat, and if you have more questions, you can either raise your hands or put them in the chat. These I'll ask them together for everybody. These are things that we are contaminants that might be in our body. So Kathy asked, joints, teeth, implants, other things that might be in our body, or do those cause environmental problems? And Melissa asked about microplastics. As our bodies harbor more and more microplastics, and as I may have a full body of pharmaceuticals when I die, how does that impact the soil? So what about those various contaminants that might be in our bodies?
At a natural burial ground, we do our best to put everything biodegradable in the soil, but I do realize that sometimes this is going to be 95% or better, such as if someone has a joint replacement or other type of surgical implants, it's not practical, or in most cases within someone's faith, to be going in after those to try and have them removed before burial. So I believe that the good we're doing of returning this organic matter, and by that I do mean your loved one, no, but by returning our bodies, the nutrients that are contained in them to the soil, along with these other beneficial management practices, we're going to overcome maybe these small negatives of some trace elements of something that we have to bury. The microbes of the soil and the ones that are found in our bodies already, the ones that in our guts that sort of take over and do the first line of rendering the body back into nature. Anyway, they do a wonderful job of sort of filtering, repurposing, breaking down everything that's inside of us. The plants don't start to eat up those materials until these microorganisms, the ones from our bodies and from the soil, have gone through several rounds of these cycles. So I know that we can do more harm and good by letting those natural cycles take place, even though we're sort of inevitably always going to be imperfect in our efforts.
And if you would choose something other than burial, if you would choose water, cremation, alkaline hydrolysis, or body composting, those, if you have a joint replacement or whatever, it would just end up at the bottom of the vessel and then it gets recycled.
So we'll go to our next two questions that were online. One is, and I don't know if anybody knows whether the answer to this, and maybe Jamie, you do. Is there like initiatives for body composting in New York? And I guess I want to extend that to other states. Like what's the policy landscape for expanding body composting beyond the few states that allow it currently?
I believe that body composting is legal in New York. Emily, do you know that answer?
That's right. My understanding is it's legal, but not yet happening. And New York is going to have an interesting challenge if the law stays the way it is. It's required that the compost go to a cemetery. So I'm sure, I'm sure that's one of the reasons it's not happening yet.
And I'm looking online right now. It is legal currently in Washington, Colorado, Oregon, Vermont, California, New York, Nevada, Arizona, Maryland, Delaware, Minnesota, and Maine. So it's legal in lots of places, but as Emily said, I don't think it's being done in lots of places. So what is going to need to happen is for people to lobby their funeral homes to start doing this. And funeral homes are really notoriously slow to change. They have been family owned for generations. They've been very low tech for a long time. They're used to doing things in the way that they're used to doing things. And even the fact of why one of the reasons that fire cremation is so popular is because funeral homes never really believed people would do it. And so they made it very, very, very cheap because they thought, well, nobody's going to do this anyway. So that'll just be, you know, our little side hustle. And then people thought, oh, it's very, very cheap. And so that's, you know, has driven people to do what is environmentally unsustainable. So I would say really start calling your funeral homes that you know, especially family-owned ones, and start encouraging them to do these other methods of disposition.
So we're going to do one more question, and I'm going to combine two. Rabbi Rick Brody asked, you know, if doing nothing is better than these sort of body composting and these other more technological advances, why are people doing them? And then Jeffrey Blackman asked Dr. Abu Islam, you know, how does Islam view body composting? Is it superfluous given the fact that nature will naturally compost the body? So right, so why are people doing body composting when doing nothing's better? And what's sort of the Islamic view of body composting?
I do think there's an opportunity for body composting as gosh, our society is so mobile in terms of people not living in the same state of their family of origin. And also we've gotten so used to cremation. A lot of folks who are choosing cremation then bring a locket of their person's remains. They wear it as jewelry. They bring it with them as they travel, and they scatter some of it all around the world. The body composting offers a reduced carbon version of the flexibility of geography that you get with cremation. So I do think there's a market for it. People also like the slowness of it compared to a cremation. You can spend time with your person, you know, externally while they're in the processor, in a way that cremation, it's over in hours. So the families who are choosing the composting are very well served, and that makes it an economic opportunity across the industry. I just don't think it's the greenest part of our industry. It's a consumer product.
Thank you. And Abu Islam, to you.
So, first of all, I think since we are talking about faith-based approaches, you know, faith starts with belief, right? So, and if you question everything and use your own judgment, then pretty soon faith becomes meaningless. But the faith itself means that you're believing in unseen and you're taking some instructions from unseen who knows better than we do. And you take that premise. So if we start questioning, hey, you know, I have this microchemicals or plastics or this, I mean, don't you think our creator knows that? Even saying that, he said that, you know, bury it, put it to the land. That's the best way. So I think we need to follow that. For example, both of our faith traditions says pork is forbidden. And I'm sure we can do analysis, paralysis, do PhDs, what is bad in pork. But there are millions of people out there who are eating and who are surviving. But why do we don't eat it? Because it's our belief that God says, stay away, stay away. He knows what's best for us. So some of these things, at some point, we have to trust our Creator. And you know, as Emily said, that doing nothing is the greenest, right? So it does decompose, and that has been done for ages, and that's we try to follow. So I haven't heard any cremation or any other composting means people asking about it, at least to the in the community that I serve or in my experience over the decades. So I think Muslims do tend to surrender in some fundamental ways to the will of God. And I would say this is one of them. They don't question.
Wonderful. So with that, I really am deeply grateful to Jamie and Abu and Emily for giving us such an interesting lesson on something I knew very little about. So we're officially close here. You know, we probably have a few minutes if people want to hang around and chat. And if anybody wants to learn more about Colorado Jewish Climate Action, please do not hesitate to get in touch. And I wish everybody a good night.
Hey, Moshe, can I make a comment?
Of course you can.
First of all, thank you for organizing this. And I agree with Jamie that we agree on so much on the topic, at least we talked about. And I just hope and pray that we agreed as much on our livings, neighbors, our surrounding state people, whoever we deal with and who are alive, as we agree upon the death. Thank you.
Amen.
Yes. I saw, Deborah put something in the chat about, is there a way to make Jewish or Muslim burial more environmentally friendly? And I would really say no. I mean, the whole Green Burial Council is doing what Jews and do. That really is what green is. Maybe we would make it so we don't grow grass there. That would be to do things in a more conservation kind of minded cemetery. I think that totally would make sense. But really what Jewish tradition and Muslim tradition is like do nothing. Take care of the earth by tucking that person back in. And really what the Green Burial Council suggests is what we've been doing for millennia.
I've got one thing we could add to the funeral, and that's carpooling. I think it's so funny that we meet in our place of worship and then we separate to get to the cemetery, and then we got to make community all over again after we were each individually sitting in traffic. Every time I give a presentation to the funeral home, I say, make a deal with your charter bus company, get a no emissions bus. You can use the TV and microphone on the bus to show your movie and have your open sharing time. And then when you get to the cemetery, everyone's all together. And we saved a bunch of car emissions too.
When Emily calls herself an entrepreneur, we can see why, because look at how she's thinking.
It's good for the customer and for the client. And hey, even the funeral director got to check their email on the road instead of driving.
Great advice. Thank you so much, everybody.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye now.
you.